Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a technical trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. And this disaster scruff of a sketch you see on the screen is what we're going to be aiming the ship towards. And if you're new to my webinars or McNeil webinars in general, especially mine, um, these are interactive. I want you to hit the chat. I want you to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt. If there's something that you see that you don't understand, or I did something that you uh, are trying to figure out what in the world I'm talking about or what I'm doing, please hit the chat. Please interrupt me. I will be more than happy to stop and try to explain something in a more coherent 2 cup of coffee kind of way instead of the 1 cup of coffee I got rolling right now. So this isn't. I have a really old set of speakers on my desk, and I kind of was looking at one of this thing the other day, and there's a lot of cool little details on this thing as far as form development, and especially for folks who are getting started. If you've never done anything in Rhino before, believe it or not, you'll be able to pull this off because we're gonna talk through it step by step. And there's only about, I don't know, 10 or 15 surfaces in this entire model, and we're gonna dig into that. So the the way I do these webinars, just so you know, the getting started, I do a sketch either the day of or the night before. I don't practice building it. I just I just kind of grip it and rip it because I want to put myself in the same position that you are in when somebody walks into your office or emails you something and says, please build this, and you've never seen it before and you need to figure out how to do it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the breakdown on this thing and how to approach it. And so to do that, let's pop into a paint program here real quick, and I'm gonna just open this Scruffy sketch, which is actually named Scruffy sketch, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in here. And so if we grab the magic red pen and start drawing some sections through here. It has very straight sides, right? Even though my sketch is showing it. It's got a nice piece of crown in here, front to back, like this. And if we were to analyze this bottom form, this would basically just be an oval. And then it's, if we at the base here, it's got this kind of transitional base that goes on, and then this actually kind of swings up like that. So we've got big a big blend and a big fillet right here. And then the back of this thing is actually quite narrow. If I were to follow this kind of through like that, this narrows out and it actually has the same shape as the back of the speaker. So it's got this kind of jaunty little shape in here. So what we need to do is kind of break this down, right? This right here, this is a tube, right? That's all it is. And this is a crowned surface that intersects that tube, right? Like that. So 2 surfaces right there. So then we've got to deal with this little neck that sticks up. And I know you can't see that in the sketch, but trust me, it's there. Um, and and that is essentially just a surface that goes like this, right? And then we need to figure out how to blend between these, and then we need to build this little box, and we need to stick all that stuff together. But at the end of the day, this thing from the top view, this little speaker actually looks like this, more like a little parabola shape, and it's got the little speaker grill and stuff like that. And so the back, if we look at this from top view, this kind of does that, right? And so we're going to dig through that, but basically this speaker is essentially one surface that goes like that, right? And then it's if we look at it from the side, it is basically, so we've got this surface that swings around here, and then we've got a top and a bottom and a front, basically a box, right? We're just going to overbuild all that stuff and trim it back. And if you're new to Rhino or new to 3D modeling, you don't know what overbuilding is. Overbuilding is if I needed a surface, right? I'm going to overbuild it. I'm going to build it bigger than I need it. And I'm going to just focus on this part that I'm going to trim out. I'm going to trim out all this stuff, right? Or maybe the top, and that will get me, you know, this kind of shape that's got my little crown part on it, right? So that's what that's what we refer to when we say overbuilding. We're gonna build the surfaces bigger than we need to and then trim them back. All right. Have I scribbled on that enough to make incoherent notes to confuse everybody? Great. We're all in the same boat. All right. So what I'm going to do, because this sketch is not orthographic, particularly useful information from an orthographic point of view, it doesn't have a top side front. We can't see anything, with the sketch itself. It does have some dimensions. It's about 3.5 wide by 4.2 something, and then this is kind of 3 by 5, or 3.5 by 3.5 by 3.7, something like that. So instead of trying to figure out how to model over this, I'm just going to stick it over here, and I'm going to just use it as a guide. And I'm actually, just because I don't need to be staring at it quite so intently, I'm going to just kind of drop the transparency of it. And the way that we do that is we click on the picture. If you haven't seen how to bring pictures in, I'm going to just delete this. We'll run the picture command, find your sketch, and then just drag it into the window. Click on it, and then if you go to your materials tab, you'll actually see there's a sketch, there's a picture material, and you can change the transparency of it down here. All right. So let's take this and stick it just kind of off into space here, and let's just kind of go for it. So we know we need an oval to start with because we're going to make a tube that's going to go like 4.5 or 4.2 long by 3.5 wide. And let's just go ahead and nail that down. Let's go to the top view. And I'm just going to use a center point ellipse, and I'm going to just drag it out to something to a proportion that looks good to me, kind of something like that. And then I'm going to draw a line, and I'm sure I could have just typed this, but that's 4.2 units by 3.5 units. And I'm just going to scale this here. Get somewhere close. Looks like my grid snaps on. Somewhere close to what I want to be. Like that. That's about kind of what I'm looking for. Somewhere in that neighborhood. And let's move this from the center just to 0. And if we want, we can dimension this to look and see how we did. So that's about 4.2, about 267. So I'm going to go with that because I kind of like that proportion as opposed to what the dimensions are showing. The one thing that I will always say is make sure that the model is the rule, not the sketch. Let's see, there's a question. Thanks for your work. Where can I watch the recording? Recording's all going to be on YouTube. Rhinoceros 3D on YouTube. Those are all going to be there. Okay. And so the next thing I need to do is I need to actually make this to something that I can model, because right now this is a degree 2 curve. So I'm actually going to change degree, and I have a little hotkey set up for that. The command is change degree. And we're going to change it from degree 2 to degree 3, and we're going to make sure that deformable equals yes. And what we're going to end up with is a degree 3 oval. Now, the one thing you'll notice, look at this, what it did. We're going to fix that by just grabbing these points, and I'm going to scale those to 0. Get rid of that little pinch right there. And I may actually even just adjust this a little bit to get a little bit cleaner shape on that. All right, and that's our seam, right? Basically that center point. So I'm actually going to rotate this because I'm going to model with that in the back here. I want to model. This is going to be the front of my model over here. So now what I can do is I can just grab a straight line and I'm going to just draw a line straight up. Okay, so that's going to be, I'm going to kind of define the shape of my tube. And now I'm going to take this, actually that's a little big. I don't need that quite so big. Let's bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to change the degree on this to be 3 so that I end up with, I turn my points on, 4 points. And that allows me to really easily add some shape to this. So I'm going to pull this and kind of define what the back, what the jauntiness factor of my of my model is going to be. I'm going to pull this guy a little bit. And that's going to give us kind of the shape that we want to roll with. And I can do this a couple of ways. I can just do a one rail sweep. I can copy this over if I want to control the front and the back shapes of this. I can control it on the front and the back like that, and then do a two rail sweep. I can get a different shape in the front. So if I want a shape like that, if I want this a little straighter in the front so that this is actually going to transition around there, we can do all that kind of stuff. So let's call that good. And let's just do a two rail sweep. And two rail sweep lives over here. And we're just going to do this. And we're going to just generate this shape. And you'll notice that it's simple, right? We have a simple curve down here. We've got simple curves up here. We're not going to change the cross sections or anything like that. We're just going to let it roll. And we get a nice, clean, simple, if we turned points on and needed to pull points, manageable amount of points. If we needed less, we could always rebuild and go from there. But for this thing, we're pretty much going to just use it as is. So the next thing I need to do is I need to define kind of this shape. And there's actually, you can't see this, but I can because I'm looking at it on my desk. This has a shape that kind of comes down and then it peels in here. There's this beautiful kind of like fading transitional form that kind of swings through here. So let's go to the back of this model back here, and let's go to the back of this, and we can tell because there's the seam right here, right? That's the surface edge, so that's the back. And I'm going to just draw a shape, and I'm going to just start kind of here, and I'm going to pull this straight through like that. And then I may turn some points on and do a little bit of adjusting because I'm a designer and I can never leave anything well enough alone by itself. I just got to mess with it. And I don't really care like how thick this is right now because I can always come back and trim this off later. So I might just roll with this. And so what I'm going to do is project this curve onto the surface. And what that does is that will give us this shape, right? Now, the problem is it also gives us that shape on the front, which we don't want. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to split. We're going to split this by a point, and I'm going to split this curve that's on the surface right kind of in the middle. And the reason I'm going to do that in the middle is because this is kind of where it's flat, right? It's already come out here and it's gone flat, and it's going to start curving back up on the other side. Well, so now in the right-hand view, I get this question a lot, like how do you get complex like 3D curves on a surface? Well, you project them from two directions. And so we're just going to project this one over here. And what we end up with, I can get rid of these now from a layer or whatever. I've got a nice 3D shape, right? And I can mirror this because I know it should be symmetrical. Part should be symmetrical. And then grab my curves and join them, and I get this complete curve. Now, your first thought would be, well, I trim this, right? If I were to trim that, look what happens. Now I've got this really complex shape that I have to try and surface over. So let's not do that. And instead, let's keep this just as a reference, right? The way that we're going to build this, there's going to be this shape in this direction, and then there's going to be a shape kind of in this direction, and then there's going to be a shape in this direction. And then all of that stuff is going to get trimmed out, and there's going to be an edge kind of somewhere in this neighborhood, right? And I don't really care if those edges are perfectly aligned. And that may seem counterintuitive, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to use what I like to lovingly refer to as the James Carruthers pipe trim trick. And whether he invented it or not, I don't know. He's the one that taught me, so I always like to give him credit for it. If you don't know James, he's a longtime Rhino uh, user and teacher and all around righteous dude. So look him up. He's got a I think he's got a company. He still does Rhino training and stuff like that. But I learned Rhino years ago off of 2 DVDs he put out, Form versus Shape 1 and the blockbuster follow-up, Form versus Shape 2. And so I always tip my hat to James because without him, I would still be using Alias and I would be sad. All right, so we've got this shape. Let's define the kind of the crowned surface. And I'm going to do this from center. I'm going to start at 0, and I'm just going to make a surface that's ish to the size that I'm looking for. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull it up until it is roughly intersecting where my projected line was. Something like that. Okay. Now I could just hack this off and it would be flat, and that's no fun. We don't want, flat stuff. But I've only got, if I turn the points on, I've only got 4 points on this, so there's nothing I can do with it. So I'm going to change degree on the surface, and changing degree allows you to add the control points to the surface, add control, and give yourself opportunities for sculpting without essentially adding complexity. So this is a single span surface, right? It's got one span going through. If I change the degree from 1 to 5, it's still going to be a single span surface. Notice we didn't get any more isoparams, but we did get more points, and that's what we're looking for. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to wireframe. I'm going to grab all of these points in the center here, and I'm going to leave the points alone around the border, and I'm going to start adding some crown. And as I do that, you're going to notice that it pulls away from my intended line here, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it again using Gumball. I'm going to just kind of aim it for that intersection line. And you can see that we've got a little bit of variation in here that needs to be dealt with, right? Let me make this curve something that we can see. I'm going to just go to the properties and I'm going to change the display color to red so we can see that. And you can see that we're low here. I kind of like the crown. You can see that like it's got like a nice kind of crowny crown going on there. But I don't like how it's dropping in the middle. So I'm going to grab these 2 points and I'm just going to raise them up just a little bit. And you can see now that that has started to wave this a little bit. So now I'm going to grab these 2 points. I'm going to pull it back down. And I'm going to just kind of go back and forth on that until I get essentially, close-ish to my curve. It doesn't need to be dead on. And the reason for that is we are gonna trim this later with a pipe that essentially is going to take some out of this surface and some out of the bottom surface and then give us an opportunity to blend. But what we're going to do is just pull points a little bit in order to get the crown that we're looking for. And we're going to just do that by eye. I'm not really going to sweat this a ton. Maybe we need to pull a little bit. Always kind of want to work symmetrically if you're going to do this type of stuff. Let's pull this down just a little bit. You can see that we can just get that kind of within horseshoes and hand grenades kind of closeness. Doesn't need to be dead on, right? But we're going to just kind of get it close-ish. Pull these. And what I want to reinforce is while you're doing this is that you don't have to take what Rhino gives you. You don't have to take what modeling software gives you. You don't have to just be like, well, I used a fillet command and it gave me a fillet and I guess I'm stuck. You don't have to do that. You can always go and sculpt and get the shapes that you want. All right, so now I can use this as a trimming object and I can trim this. And you can see that I end up with a really nice kind of representation of this object. But instead of trimming it, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split this surface. So let's split this surface with this, and then we're going to use this to trim this. And then that way I know at least that like this and this, if I were to join them, they'd be a solid object, right? And that's kind of what we wanted. Now, there's kind of a no man's land through here that I have to figure out how to make a transition with. And so what I'm going to do is instead of trying to model this complex shape, right? This little wedgy pointy thing back here is going to be a pain. I don't want to have to deal with that. So what I want to do actually is let's take this and let's split it. And I'm going to split this by isocurve. And I'm going to split it up here with enough room to give myself to be able to, make a gap. So I'm going to hide this. And so I want to keep this part right in the back, but I don't really need any of this other stuff in the front. And so I can actually kind of hide these curves for the time being. And then we can start looking at like, what does this transition look like? And it may seem counterintuitive that we got rid of, the transitional material between the two, but the idea is I want to let Rhino figure out how the transitions work as opposed to trying to plan them myself. And so let's start with, let's just draw a straight line from corner to corner. And I have a hotkey set up on my curve tool, whereas if I left click it, I actually get a degree 3 line. And let me show you how I did that. If I go to, I find this super useful because I use this all the time. I have where is it? Oops, sorry, not there. I built a little script for this, and I'll copy and paste this into the chat so you can have it if you want to make one. What I did was shift right click on one of the buttons. And then what I did is I actually moved the line command to the right mouse button, which is just a straight line. And then I added this little script, which gives me a degree 3 line. And the cool thing about that is that degree 3 line, if I draw it, it already has my 4 points in it. So I don't have to draw a line and then change degree. So that was a nice little efficiency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that little tool that I built and then do this. And then I've got my points already set up for editing, and I can pull in that parabolic shape like super easy, right? And I can adjust that just by scaling with Gumball, whether I want it to be shaped like that or this or whatever I want, right? So I can do variations and kind of figure out in 3D what I think is going to look good. And so once I get that set, we're going to go sweep 2, pick the right tool, and I'm going to sweep that down like that, and can look at it and say it looks a little bit kind of like a golf club handle, right? So let's add another shape at the bottom to get a little bit of variation top to bottom, because I actually want this to grow a little bit going forward. And so far, just to recap, we haven't done anything complicated yet. This is all something that if you've never tried Rhino before, this is super accessible. You can do this. Okay, so we're going to do sweep 2, which lives over here. I keep using my pop-up. I should use the toolbar. And we're going to use the edges of this and these two curves we just generated. And we're going to get this nice 2-rail sweep. And we can play with it a little bit and say we can maintain height. I actually like to maintain the height because it gives you a nice little added bulge there. Without it, it's just kind of a straight interpolation. If you maintain the height, it actually is going to scale as it goes from 1 to 1. And so we're going to go ahead and use that. Now, I need to be able to transition from this edge to this surface now. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually draw a curve on this surface, and I'm going to bring my curves back so that I can see where about I wanted that transition to start. And if you can look, we kind of go tangent right about here, right? So let's pull an iso curve from the surface. We're going to go over here to this tool. It says extract iso curve, and we're just going to, it's going the wrong way, so I'm going to hit the T key. And I'm going to place it right about here, okay, so that I know that that's about where I want, the transition to kind of land. And so what we'll do is I'm just going to drop this there as a curve. And then what I can do is grab this, turn its points on, and you can see that its points are already nicely distributed. But what I'm going to do is instead of using that, I'm going to use my 4-point line again, and I'm just going to go end to end. And then I'm going to cell last. I'm going to turn those points on. And what that will do is that'll give me these points that I can then pull this like that and kind of look and see where this transition would all happen, right? And so I kind of like where that's going. So, but I think I want it to be a little wider. I think I want to pull it out a little bit like that. And so what we're doing is we're defining where this transition is going to happen. It's going to start here, right? And it's going to end here. And so what I can do is go to the top view. I can use this as a trimming object, and I can trim this. Now I've built a gap. And the best way I found to fill a gap in Rhino is just to use a blend surface, which lives over here. And we're just going to blend from here to here, and we're going to do it. We'll just go ahead and run it curvature. Now, notice the edges. See how kind of swoopy and not cool they are? I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to click on this middle, and then I'm going to snap it over here, and check that out. It lands almost exactly on our curve. Just snap that over there. And it gives us a really beautiful transition. So I'm actually going to call that done. I'm going to just go ahead and accept that. I might just bump these just to make sure. I like to click in these because what it does is it makes sure that whatever changes you made, it makes sure that it kind of resets this to make sure that it's exactly in the center. And then I'm going to run it. And if we go to rendered view, you can see that that transition is really pretty nice. Now, we've modeled ourselves into a problem, right? We've got this weird pinchy shape. And this is where we didn't overbuild, but we're going to, because we're going to grab this extend surface and we're going to pull this out on both sides, essentially going past where we wanted to go. And then I can bring back this shape And ta-da, look at that. I can take this and I can trim, grab this and trim, and we end up with a really cohesive, really nice, really nicely blended shape. And if I join this all up, if we go over here and let's just throw a metal shader on it so we can take a look at it, because that tends to expose all of the lies. We can look and say, I'll take that. That's fine. That's good. That'll get me through my day. So now what we need to do is we need to manage this this transition. I'm going to hide everything. I'll hide all the curves. We need to manage this transition along this edge, right? Because we built this and we knew that we were going to have to 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 fillet this or whatever. And there's a couple ways we could do this. We could try the automatic way, which we're just going to go over here. I'm going to use blend edge instead of fillet because I like blends better than fillets. And if we try the blend edge command, and let's set this to like something small, like 0.2. Actually, let's drag a handle and see what feels good. I think something probably pretty small, like 0.3. 0.03, 0.03, I think is what we were looking at. So I'm going to set those all to 0.03. We can preview them, see what it looks like, and then let it roll. And in this case, it didn't make the trim because it either didn't run the surface long enough or whatever the deal was. But we can actually use this as a trimming object, grab these surfaces and join them. They should join into one surface. And then what I'm going to do, since we overbuilt the top of this, I'm going to just trim off all of this so that we know all of this stuff lines up. And then we can trim using this object. And if we're living right, it'll work. And if it doesn't, then it'll fail. And we'll have to actually go in and kind of pick at this piece by piece. And so it looks like that's going to be the case. So that's a lot of hassle, right? And what I find is that you can go through and do this, and we can actually trim, you know, just to prove that we can do it. If I trim and then I type CRV, we can use curves to go back and trim this stuff, right? And it will actually trim and it will actually go together like that, right? And if we join it, it should look all right. See what our naked edges look like. It does look like it's got a bunch of naked edges because we didn't trim. Looks like there was still some stuff down here that didn't trim. So that's kind of a hassle, right? So let's back up and let's do it a different way. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually grab this edge. I'm going to duplicate it. There's a video on this actually called the pipe trim trick. And I'm going to duplicate this edge and I'm going to turn this into a curve. I'm going to join it so that it's one curve. And then I'm going to run a pipe across it. And I'm going to run that pipe, let's say, oh, I don't know what feels good, something like this. And I'm just going to let that run. Now, I need to take these caps off, and then I need to extend these. Can't extend a poly surface, got to explode it into its base surfaces. And then I'm going to extend this past the object where it started. And it looks like this one might be trimmed, so let's untrim it and then extend it. There we go. Then I can join this all back. And then what it does is it turns it into this circular cutter. And this is really cool because what it does is it builds perfect little gaps. I can click in here, and what it does, when I delete this, you'll see, it builds a perfect little gap around this thing. And so if you've seen any of my other videos, you will have heard me harp on this. But sometimes it's as important to build specific gaps as it is to build specific surfaces. You just kind of have to flip your thinking. And in this case, we wanted a specific gap that we can then go back and fill with blend surf. Let's do this, chain edges. There we go. We're going to blend surf this, and look at how nicely that goes in. And we can do curvature, tangency, whatever we want. If we want to get crazy, we can do that. And it looks like we've got a little points crossing going on here, which we don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just pull this back a little bit. I'm going to pull this back a little bit. We just don't want those to cross. It's like Ghostbusters, cross the streams. Right, and that ends up with that nice transition. Clean it up. And now if we look at naked edges, see how nice and clean that is? And if we render it, and I shut the edges off, we're living right. Okay? Everybody with me still? This could be furniture, this could be, whatever. These principles apply to a lot of different things as far as what you can do with it and all that kind of stuff. So let's take a look at this. And I think this feels too skinny to me. So I'm actually going to just chunk it just a little bit. I'm a big proponent of designing in 3D as opposed to just blindly following a sketch. If it doesn't look good in 3D, fix it. All right, so the other thing that's going on in this, if we go back to our terrible sketch, you can see that it has this little eyebrow that's got a volume knob that it allows you to have an on-off and a volume little radial button there. And this smoothly transitions in and out of this top surface, which also seems kind of complicated, but it really isn't. What we want to do is we want to start with just a simple square. I'm going to lock it down at the center just so that I know it's symmetrical. And then I'm going to bring this out. And then what I need to figure out is kind of where I want this to start and where I want this to end. And so I'm going to explode these. I'm going to change degree on all of them to 3 so that I get control points that I can modify. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start designing this transition. And I kind of want these to follow that. Maybe this needs to come in a little bit so that my highlights are going to track properly. And maybe that's even too wide still. Let's go something like that. And then maybe these need to come out. See how useful that 4-point line is? I find it to be just like incredibly useful. And then I think overall this thing is way too wide. So don't need this guy. Move this up like that. And then maybe I want to change how this kind of lays down like that. Maybe these are wider so that I can kind of design my highlights. Kind of want everything to kind of flow. These guys need to come apart farther like that. Back a little bit. Kind of a little family of shapes thing going on. Maybe these guys need to come back a little bit like that and scale out. That kind of gives us, the location of where this thing needs to lay down. And so what I'm going to do, let's grab these and this object and hide everything else using isolate. I have a hotkey set up for that, but the command is isolate. And then what we're going to do is trim a hole in the top of this thing. And we're going to just use these curves and just pull in it. And that gives us a nice four-sided opening, which we can then go back and use edge surf, which lives over here. And we can just go 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we look at the points on this, you'll see it's got a ton of points. That's too much stuff. We don't need that much stuff. So what I'm going to do is rebuild this. I'm going to rebuild it degree 5 in both directions with 6 control points. So it's essentially going to be a single span surface. And I've got enough points now that I can match this curvature or tangency or whatever I want, but I've got enough control points that I can match it, but I can also do this. If I come to these points, right? So I'm going to grab these points here. I'm just going to pull them up. And that is going to give us our little eyebrow, and then we can change, the aspect ratio or whatever we want to do with that. And we might want to, these points are a little ratty. So what we might want to do is straighten those out a little bit. Might want to just kind of straighten those a little. And when I say ratty, I mean that they're the control polygon is kind of zigzagging all over the place, and I don't really want that. So I'm going to just kind of clean up the flow on this a little bit. And ideally, I would be doing this all symmetrically and all that kind of stuff, but, demo timelines. I'm going to just eyeball it and get it pretty close. And that gives us our little eyebrow shape. So the last thing that we need to do is we need to just match surf, match this one to here. And we're going to preserve the isocurve direction so that it doesn't mess with that. And I'm going to just match it tangency. I don't need to go curvature on this because curvature is going to be a little bit too aggressive. And so I'm going to match there. I'm going to match here. I'm going to match here and join it up. And if we render it, the transitions look pretty good, right? Now, the cool thing about this is if we look at this and we decide that we don't like it, I can always extract this and I can turn on the points. And we know that because we matched it tangency, we can't mess with this row, or this row because those are our tangent matches, right? But what we can mess with are all the other ones. So if you don't like that transition, we can come in here and we can kind of do a little bit of sculpting and we can adjust that a little bit in ways that we could clean it up or we could change, right? Can't touch this one because that's the tangent one. Can't touch that one because that's the position one, but I can touch this one. And so I can decide kind of what I want to do with that and this transition and iterate a little bit with that and say, okay, well, maybe this thing is a little bit too aggressive and it needs to be a little more subtle. I can come in and adjust that, and then I can evaluate the highlights and see what it looks like. But I haven't messed with anything because I haven't touched either of those rows that created the tangency, right? So if I go in here and render this, I can see that my highlights are kind of doing about what I wanted them to do. And you can play with this, with a metal shader, you can do this in rendered view and turn the points on, and you can actually go through and mess with this stuff and figure out exactly, if you're really trying to be specific about highlights, you can do that. For this case, I'm not really going to worry too much about it. And then the last thing that we're going to do is to close this up is I'm going to just loft these two surfaces together and join it. That gives us kind of our base, right? And this is the most complex part of the thing. Go ahead and add our knob because that's fairly easy. then I'm going to just kind of bring this out to about here. I'm going to click it. I'm going to drag the extrude dot with gumball to get some shape. And then I'm going to just position it somewhere kind of in there. Now, I would like to have this button have a similar kind of dome to this shape. So let's go ahead and just duplicate this edge. Why work hard if we don't have to? I'm going to isolate just that. And if we go to the front view, I'm going to split this in half. And what I can do, actually, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I am going to do that. They're like, wow, you really don't rehearse these. Nope. Making it up as I go along. And let's split this curve using a point. And we're just going to get it close. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to have it be a little bit overbuilt. And then let's go, because that would be line to line and we don't want that, I'm going to scale it in this direction. And that's going to give us kind of a family of shape thing going on. I can actually compare kind of how those two are going to go together. And maybe I go like that. And then maybe I go this. And that should kind of give me at least a family of shape feel without being like a straight offset, which is kind of boring to look at. So let's revolve this. And I'm going to just use the C-plane Z axis. So I'm going to hit enter. And we want it to be a full rotation. And you can see how those overlap and intersect. So I'm just going to grab those, say trim, join, blend the edge. So I'm going to use blend. The reason I like to use blend instead of fillets is fillets are round and blends are continuity. And I like the look of the continuity over the look of a round ball fillet. Round ball fillets always look like very SolidWorksian to me. And I try to say that without it being an insult. But nobody likes round ball fillets because they just look super boring and super dead and static. So that's our part. And then we want to add a few little details to it. So let's grab a ellipse and let's just stab one kind of right in here like that. And got a bit last pick. Something kind of like that. And then let's go and position it using gumball. And what we're doing is we're just going to take a little bite out of this. I'm going to make a little cutter. And go to the top view. We're going to do a polar array. Make a bunch of copies of these. Let's do like, I don't know, 8. And maybe more. Like 13. That feels okay. And if I don't like the shape of that, because I did this with history, I can modify it and it will update, modify the parent object. And then let's just do a Boolean. I'm going to cap this first just to make sure that it's closed. Type easier. I'm going to just do a Boolean subtract. Get rid of all these guys and leave myself with little details here. And we can go and, if we wanted to get crazy, we could fillet that stuff, but I'm trying to move quick here. So, and we can see that actually kind of works nicely with our object, right? That looks pretty good. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this guy just a little bit, because what I want to do is I want to make sure that I get a good Boolean out of that. And then I want to, actually I want to Boolean that before, Let's see. I think I needed to Boolean the button out of this before I did that. So watch this. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go backwards. And then I'll delete these guys here. And I'm going to Boolean this. Let's cap this so that it's capped. That's a solid object now. And then let's Boolean this out. Fail on me, will ya? Failed. All right, let's figure out why it failed. And it might be that we've just got a surface too close to another surface. Sometimes it doesn't like, or it could be, I think I know what it is. This is the seam, and the seam was lying exactly on this surface, and it doesn't like that. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to actually rotate this so that the seam is inside here, and I bet it'll work now. Yep. Oops, looks like I had something. I had my normals turned inside out on one of them. Yep, this one. See, the normals are pointing inside out. Let's just flip those. If you get a Boolean, result that you didn't expect, 9 times out of 10 is because your normals are jacked up. That's better. So now, because I put the finished one on the clipboard, I can just paste it. I get it back. I'm going to scale it just a hair so that it has just the tiniest bit of clearance in there. And that gives us that little detail. All right, so that's the base of this essentially finished. And there's a cut line that runs around the bottom of this that we can add, and it actually rolls, the bottom rolls. So let's just do that. Let's do that. This is the most complex part of the part. The actual speaker part of it is actually really simple. And then let's make our cut line. And I'm going to just do that with a straight line. I'm going to project it. Any questions so far? I'm watching the chat. Am I killing you guys? Or are you still with me? Going to just make this a little shape like that. And then I'm going to just Boolean that out. And that just gives us our little cut line. If you were going to be crazy about it, you could go and then apply a tiny fillet to each one of these edges. I'm not going to do that today. Let's take a look and see how we're doing. And let's throw, I've got some plastic on here that I've been kind of messing with. So that kind of looks about like I was expecting. All right, let's take a look at the speaker. So the speaker on this thing is actually a pretty simple part. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this curve to develop the surface that goes around this. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use this. I'm going to copy these two surfaces. Actually, I'm going to just copy one of them because that's all I really need. And I'm going to build my surface off of that surface. So let's isolate it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in top view, I'm going to kind of lay this out essentially kind of like where I want this to be. And I kind of want it to go like in this direction. And then I want it to be kind of about that wide. And so what I'm going to do is draw a straight line there and then delete this. You're like, well, that seems dumb. It does until I do this. Get this kind of vaguely in the right direction that I want, like that. And what I'm going to do is let Rhino figure out this curve between here and here. I'm going to flip that and drag it to the end. And you can see that I can come in here and then develop this in a way that gives me kind of a tangent shape. And then what I can do is I can do a sweep 1, and that gives me one side of this. If I delete this, because I built this off of this surface, these should be symmetrical and tangent at the back. And so what I can do is I can stick my gumball right here with gumball relocate, and then I can decide like how wide, you know, whatever that is. So let's bring the base back and take a look at it and say, okay, how do these relate to each other? Now, this is overbuilt, so I've got more than I need. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this just tuck past it a little bit like it does in the actual part. And then decide kind of like what. And in this case, what it does is it looks like this edge might need to come out a little bit farther like that. And if you're wondering, let's do it with the points instead. Grab these points and let's just forward a little bit. Oops. A lot of people use layers. I just hide and unhide stuff all the time. And I want this, I don't like kind of the aspect ratio of that. I think it needs to be a little fatter. So I'm going to fatten this a little bit. And because of what we know about tangency, right? As long as we keep all of these points lined up, then all we need to do is scale or shrink them closer together, farther apart, and we're still going to end up with a tangent match. So I'm going to kind of just follow that shape a little better. And then I also kind of want this to bulge a little more like that. And then I want these to return a little bit like that. That kind of feels family of shapey, right? And then what we're going to do is just continue to overbuild this. And I'm going to use my 4-point line. And I'm going to go from here to kind of here. And then I'm going to redo the same thing. I'm going to kind of go here to here, which is going to determine kind of the you know, the spread of this thing, so to speak. And I'm going to turn my points on. Looks like it didn't give me my 4-point line. So let's change degree on those to 3. And I'm going to grab the points of this one. I'm going to pull it up a little bit to give myself some shape. Same thing down here. Just pull these two down. I can't overemphasize how useful that 4-point line is, because it really allows you to be able to generate really clean, really nice, really useful curves that are balanced. The parameterization on them is really good and all that kind of stuff. And so now what we can do is we can just grab this. I can drag the extrude dot, hold down shift, do the same thing down here, drag the extrude dot, hold down shift to go in both directions. And we end up with this, right? Now, these both, it would be nice if these both were kind of the same length. So I'm going to just Control Shift click the edge, and I'm going to shift drag, or I'm going to drag it back and then use snappy dragging to get those about the same width. And then what I'm going to do is turn on the points, and you can see that they're degree 3 in this direction because I've got 4 points there, but they're only degree 1 in this direction. I actually need it to be degree 3 in both directions. So I'm going to change degree on those. And then what I can do is grab all of these center points, and I can add my crown just by giving that a little bend like that. And then I can pull this down so that they all intersect. Might need to make this a little taller. Everything's intersecting. And it looks like my transitions on this, it's kind of tucking in like that. I don't want it to tuck in, I actually want it to flare out. So let's grab these points. Actually, let's rebuild. Let's rebuild these. Do them 4 and 4 at degree 3. And what that's going to do, we're going to lose a little bit of shape, and we're going to actually have to go fix a few things. So if we turn the points on, you go down in degree, you lose shape. If you go up in degree, the shape stays the same. So let's grab all of these points, and we're going to go to the top view. We're going to go to the top view. There we go. And we're going to just scale these to 0, which is going to bring them all. Oop, don't want to do that. You got to do it one at a time. So let's grab these guys. I'm going to put there. Actually, let's just go ahead and match surf. That'll do it faster. There we go. We're going to average them. And then we're going to say OK. Now, if we don't like the spread of this, right? If we don't like the shape of it, all we have to do is grab this one and this one, those rows, and we can change it. But because we're moving in a straight line, it doesn't affect the tangency of the object. So let's grab these and let's get a little bit better shape there. And then the main thing that we need to fix is this tucking in. So let's grab these two. This is like one of the coolest things about NURBS. Like if you haven't done models where you've gone in and started pulling on the CVs, I would really, really encourage you to do so, because this is really where the power of being able to do surfacing comes from, because you can really, really manipulate this stuff to do exactly what you want it to do. Let's do that. And then that way we get this kind of cool transition where it goes from inside to outside, but we've got this shape on the front, and that all intersects. Looks good, and we just need to put a face on it. So let's make our life easy, and we'll just snap 4 points here, and then we're going to change the degree to 3 and 3. It's points on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this a little bigger. It intersects everything. Move it in a little bit. We can decide where that thing needs to land, and I think it probably needs to kind of be somewhere, looks like somewhere kind of right in about here. And I'm going to make it a little narrower. And then I'm going to add some crown, which all I need to do to add crown is just grab these 4 points. Just pull them. Just going to add the tiniest bit of crown to that. And then the second part of that trick is to grab these 4 points and just pull those back a little bit. And you end up with a really beautifully crowned surface Super easy. Now we've got all this stuff overbuilt, right? We can use this tool here, which is kind of fun, which is this make solids, create a solid. I'm going to grab all of these guys and just go bloop. And what it'll do is it'll trim all that stuff at the same time and connect it all together. Now, we can take a look at the relationship between this. It looks a little wide and it looks a little squatty, so I'm going to just make it a little bigger. I like all the other parts of it. And then let's use this object. I'm going to Boolean this out so that it caps it. And I'm not going to delete my input. And then I'm going to just delete this leftover piece. By using a Boolean instead of a trim, what I get is I get that surface for free. I don't have to go trying to figure out how to match those things all up. So now all I need to do is add some blends to this thing. And we're going to just do that with the blend tool. I always run my previews on so I can see what they look like. Let's go just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to set all. And then let that run. And the blend, what it does is it just gives you really nice, blended edges instead of that kind of rolling ball fillet, which I just am not a fan of. So let's add our plastic material on there. And then we just need to design a speaker grill. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to extract this guy so that I can work on it by itself. And let's go to shaded view. Let's look at it face on. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw a shape on here. And I'm going to use O snaps to find the mids and then the center. And then I'm going to just draw my speaker grill shape in here. I could dupe the edge. Actually, let's do that. That'll be easier. Let's grab this and just dupe the edge. And then we can just shift drag it. That gives us a nice little offset. Let's split the surface. We're almost home, so if you're getting foot tappy. And then what I want to do is I actually want to align the gumball to the object. And it looks like it's not finding the normal on there. So let's make a custom C-plane. So let's grab this and we're going to make a C-plane custom to the object, and then we're going to align gumball to the C-plane. And then you can see that it's aligned normal to that, and I can just do this, bloop. And it gives me my speaker grill, and I'm going to get rid of the back of this. And then all I need to do is just knock this edge off. And we used 0.45 the last time, so we need to do something smaller because this is going to fail. That's why I like preview. You can see like when the models are going to fall apart. And even in the corner, see how that's a little ugly? I'm going to go even a little smaller. There we go. That's a much better resolution around those corners. So that's kind of, Rhino's kind of telling you what the right thing to go in that location is. Let's join this guy up. And then I've got a speaker grill material that I can assign to that. And it looks like I need to up or down my size actually. Something kind of like that. And ideally, if we were gonna go for it, we would want to make sure that this has the internals and stuff built on it. But I'm not gonna go that far with it at this point. The last thing that we want to do, maybe we'll add a little on-off LED, and maybe we'll just tuck that kind of right in here. Hide all my curves. And I'm going to just do that with a sphere. And I'm going to Boolean this out. My render mesh looks terrible. I'm going to Boolean this out, and then I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. And then we're going to add a new material. We'll make a emission material. We'll make the color kind of an obnoxious green, and we'll apply that onto there. And then we can add decals and all the other kind of stuff that we want. But essentially what this does is this gives us this kind of fully wrapped up thing that we can then either throw it through a printer because it's all watertight. We can do some renderings. We can do stuff like, whatever else we wanted to do with it at that point. But it's essentially at this point ready to go. We could print it. We could stick some electronics in it. Looks like there's a cut line around the face of this. So let's just throw that in there. Project that on, and then we're about done. Any questions? How many of you are completely and utterly new to Rhino? Like just literally looking at it for the very first time? So for the folks who are brand new to Rhino, is this blowing your mind or is this followable? How's the pace? All that kind of stuff. We're kind of in a process where we're really trying to reach out to folks who are new to Rhino and make sure that we're getting you information that you can use in order to be able to build stuff. Did we blow your mind, or is this all followable? And then, if we wanted to do a fancy rendering, we'd probably do something like this. We'd turn one, the history. Slide it around kind of like that. Probably do some kind of heroic pose. I might go to the camera and change it to 35 mil so that we get a little bit more dramatic angle. Rendered mode. Go to ray trace mode. Might even throw a little bit of focal blur on here. We're going to focus on that. And then maybe we crank this down. Get some kind of hero rendering going on here. And there you go. Congratulations. If you wanted, let's see, which free software would you recommend to view 3D models? That is a great question. And if you go to the Apple iTunes store, you can pick up iRhino for any iOS device, iPad or iPhone, and there's a fabulous viewer. That would be where I would send you for a viewer. If you want to send it to somebody who is using a different software, you need to find out what software they're using. But most 3D modeling softwares use IGEST or STEP, so you could send them an IGEST or a STEP model. Any other questions? Well, I tell you what, hour and 17 minutes. I think we put a bow on it. If there's no other questions, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for joining. My name's Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil. This is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.